Okay, good morning. It is Tuesday. Yeah, I believe it is Tuesday. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you are. It is morning now in the Netherlands. My name is Fani Renders, and today we are going to be doing a .NET Core or C# and C# or rather workshop. For those folks out there that don't know anything about C# or .NET Core, this stream is for you especially, because I got some feedback on my previous streams about folks that really want to get involved into programming. Sorry about that. Really want to get involved into programming and do not know how or how to get involved, or what content to go and view, where to go and look for videos and stuff like that. So I thought, well, it might be a good idea to spend an hour and a half, an hour, to maybe show you guys around. It's not that scary, and to show you it's actually very nice and easy to get started with .NET Core or C# and C#. Always get it right, wrong. So if you enjoy this and if you just joined us in the chat room, welcome, hello. Let me see if there is anyone. Okay, there's no one chatting at the moment. If you have any questions, ping me in the chat. It's here. You will see that I will probably be responding immediately. This workshop is very flexible, so it's not like a fixed workshop you will get like a normal classroom type of workshop. It's very interactive, so I'm just gonna go with it and share my knowledge of what I know and how I got started with the language and the framework, to also teach you guys out there that do not know or really want to learn more of this. So please, if you have any questions, please post it on the chat. I'll be happy to stop and answer them, and maybe we'll cook up a custom demo for you, or just we can go anywhere we want with this. So hold on tight, buckle up, get your favorite coffee or your beverage. We are going to have fun with an hour and a half of coding C# and .NET Core. So get some music going. How you all feeling this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening? I don't think. The stream is now in Pacific time. It's around 11:30. So the guys that are awake, give me a hoop hoop. If you want to. It is basically morning, and UTC time is just about the crack of dawn. I think it's a great time to start learning stuff. Get your mind sort of opened up to learn something new. Okay, what do we have here? So let's quickly get started. Let's set the scene. So what is .NET? So .NET is a framework initially built by Microsoft, and you use tools like Visual Studio, which is an IDE. It's a software package that you install on your computer. And back in the day, I'm talking about like 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I don't know. Visual Studio is still the de facto software for building .NET apps or Windows-based apps. But the problem was that the framework and the software building the framework was very tightly coupled to each other, which led to numerous things, right? So longer release cycles, the framework cannot innovate as fast as it wants to innovate. Also, it's only Windows-based kind of things. It was a big monolith. It's all these things, and it took years to sort of get to where they are. And frankly speaking, .NET Core came along. The vision of .NET Core is to be completely cross-platform, to be a very competitive, performant framework in the market, and they took the industry by storm. And until today, you can use any editor you want, even Notepad. We might do that in Notepad just to show off. Just give me a sec. And yeah, and I'll show you guys how to install Visual Studio if there's time, but I'm mainly going to focus on a blank sheet, a blank slate. I've got Windows Sandbox here to show that starting from scratch, it's not that difficult to get started. So what is a framework? So now a framework is a kind of a it contains base libraries. Now I'm testing actually my own knowledge here in a sense, but it's a way to help you to write better code or get started very quickly. And it contains base stuff like your constructs, like your strings and your integers and all that kind of things. And it also contains a runtime. So how .NET works is that you write your code in like it goes from text and it gets compiled into an intermediate language. It's very important because .NET reads this intermediate language. The runtime reads this intermediate language, and then it sort of executes. So when you compile your code, if they talk about code compilation, also if you see on your computer, your Windows computers, there is an .exe program. That is a program, right? That's a Windows program, not necessarily built with .NET, but it's a compiled program, right? So when you compile a .NET program, it's either a DLL, a dynamic link library, or an exe, but it still gets compiled by default to intermediate language. And then when it runs, it uses the .NET runtime, which is on the machine or in the same directory, to sort of boot up the application, and the application runs on top of this runtime. So it is always dependent on the .NET runtime. Now, if you compile it differently, which is also the option, we'll also dive into that maybe later, maybe in a different course, maybe a more advanced course. You can compile this to be runtime agnostic, so actually compiling it with the runtime in your application. So that means you don't need .NET to run your application. So for certain scenarios, this will make sense. For other scenarios, they call it the portable libraries, will make more sense. So I hope I kind of kickstart this whole workshop in a good way. Like I said, if you have questions, just pop there a question. Don't be scared. It's totally fine to ask questions, and there are no stupid questions, only stupid answers. And luckily, I'm the one answering, which is quite scary sometimes. All right, so this .NET Core thing, it runs cross-plat. So I don't have a Linux machine or Mac machine lying around now. I'm just working on Windows. Let me share my screen. So this is what you see here. Oh, here. This is a new feature from Windows 10. It's called Windows Sandbox. So it's my first time actually working inside Windows Sandbox, and this is a real PC with nothing in here. So you've got like nothing, right? So I'm given that we're starting from scratch. Hello for the folks that just joined. I've just got a notification. Just going to wave at you, maybe give you a little capuchin to say hi, welcome. I was just starting off this workshop showing how easy it is to get started with .NET Core and the language. So you will need a couple of things to get started. So first and foremost, you would need .NET Core, at least. And then you would need something to build applications in, like a text editor. So we could use VS Code, which is a cross-plat code editor, or we could install, if you're on Windows, you could install the full-fledged Visual Studio edition, or you can install Visual Studio Edition, which is free. There's a community edition that's completely free. Or you can install, if you have a Mac, you can install Visual Studio for Mac, and that you can run that on your Macintosh if needs be. So I'm Windows now, so I'm just gonna basically start off here and see where we go. So first of all, we want to go to .net. So .net. That's where we want to go. And then here, this is the starting landing page for .net. Yeah, like I said earlier, you can use, well, I haven't actually mentioned this, .NET, you can use it to build physically any application you want. Web applications, mobile applications, desktop applications, and microservice applications, whatever that means, gaming, machine learning, Internet of Things, or cloud applications, which is similar to web applications, I suppose. Anything you want, you can build with .NET. In my previous streams, I've been doing, if you have been watching, I've been doing even Blazor applications. Now that's also .NET, but it's like a single page applications for the UI, and I don't use JavaScript, although you can, but the idea is to C# or .NET everything, and it makes it easy for .NET developer to do basically anything you want, which is quite cool. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go and download .NET, and I'm going to go ahead and not use the latest version because if you noticed here on top, there's a release candidate available for .NET Core 3. And it's .NET Core 3 actually ships next week, September 23rd at .NET Conf. So if you can go to .NET Conf, it's .NET conf.net. It's an online event which is free. You can also learn so much about .NET and the news coming up of .NET. So it's dudes, stay tuned. I just want to see what's happening with this. Yes. So this online event is tons of great speakers speaking. It's always a hit to watch. But anyway, so what we want to do, I'm just going to go ahead and click this Get .NET Core Preview. But if you really want to sort of stick with the latest supported version today, you can just download .NET Core, the normal 2.2 version. But from next week, you will see .NET Core 3 stand here. So that's the next level of .NET Core goodness. That's the newest version. But today I'm going to be parting on the Preview 3 RC version. Now, when you download it, you will see there are two flavors, right? You can either download the runtime only, like if you have already a DLL that you want to run or a program that you want to run, you can just download the runtime and then just ship it. That is not used for development at all. Then you will have a download .NET Core SDK. Now that is what you need to develop against. So that will include the runtime. So it will include the framework and the runtime. And then if you're using Visual Studio 2017, you can just, excuse me, then you can, of course, download that version for 2017. So I'm just going to head here and go get to the preview version. And I want to go and get the installer for .NET Core, run. And it installs in a sec. It shouldn't take too long. I all like my shirt. Eh? I see deaf people. Nice. Okay, so what's happening here? Install. while that is installing. Okay, so now it's been installed. So what has been installed here now? We have the SDK, we have the runtime, and then we have ASP.NET. And then we have the .NET Core Windows Desktop runtime. So what are those things? The .NET Core is the base layer framework that is used to build physically any application. It's also aided as the base for all frameworks, right? Then you have ASP.NET, which is used normally to build server applications like web type of applications, web and maybe mobile front-end type of applications, but not mobile applications like native apps. That you would need Xamarin for, which is a different framework that is not included into this. So ASP.NET is if you want to be building a website kind of thing or a web app or a microservice, you will use ASP.NET Core. If you want to be spending your time learning, I would say we would stick with the .NET Core SDK, which is just installed right now. All right, so that is installed, which is great. Just want to see if we have the terminal. Oh, the terminal is not installed on this Sandbox. We have a store. We have a store. It's not working though. That's cool. Okay, so let's not waste too much time. So what we want to do is we want to go into the command prompt. So this is the black screen everyone is a bit afraid of. Can I zoom in here? Yes. Look how cool is this. I can zoom in. That's awesome. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so now to see what version of .NET Core, you can always go .NET, and that will bring up .NET, the .NET CLI, right? And we would use .NET to compile things. And if you want to see what version is installed, you go .NET -- version, and we can see we have the release candidate of 3.0.100 installed currently in our machine, which is great. So now let's quickly head over to a sandbox. Let's maybe make a sandbox. Let's call this dev just to be frank. And we go and say cd dev. All right, so what do? To get started from the get-go, you can go .NET new, and it will show you all the things that you can do with .NET new. So you can create a console application, a class library, a WPF application, a Windows Forms application, worker service, which is a kind of a background service. There's unit tests, Razor components, Razor pages, MVC pages, all these kind of things we could get into future editions of this learning series. But for now, just to get started, I would say, where's my screen? Let's quickly go and say .NET new. Let's actually make a directory. Let's call this hello world. Okay. So now let's say .NET new console. I want to make a console library application that's basically the same as this black thing. And I'm going to hit enter. So what that will do, it will take my parent directory as the name of my application, and it will scaffold me a console application out of there. Now basically, before I go and open that console application, I want to show you how it physically breaks down. So let's actually quickly open Notepad. We can also zoom in here. This is amazing. You can now zoom in Notepad. Amazing. So any program has a starting point. So we have a class and we have program. Okay, that's the starting point of any class. And then you have something called these brackets, right? So a bracket, for each class, you have a class identifier with a name of the class. So this can be foo or bar or whatever. And then you open up this class. It's like a grouping. So these brackets, these curly brackets, you define to sort of open and close the scope of the class. Now classes can be either, like it's now default, I think it's private default, but you can explicitly make it private, or you can say it's a public class or internal class or whatever. So the difference between the public, private, and internal: private, it is only private within the scope of this, how can I call it, within the scope of the assembly. Public means it exposed this class outside of the assembly. So other references can make use, outside the assembly, can make use of this class. And if you say internal, oh wait, that's the same as internal. Internal and private. There's a difference between internal and private. I'm not entirely sure. Let's quickly Google it because I'm not entirely sure. C# internal versus private. Let's quickly see what they say here. Internal is for assembly scope and private is for class scope. Okay, so yeah, this will make sense. Private will make sense if you have a private class within a private class, a private class within a class, I would say. So you can totally do this. You can have foo. So foo is only accessible within the scope of program, right? So that's how you use the modifiers. All right, so for our case, we're gonna have a program, right? And a program needs to do something. And for any program to run in .NET, you would need a entry point for the program. This is the starting point of a program. And the class needs to be named program. And I think this needs to be static, if I'm not mistaken. Let me quickly double check on that. I'm trying to kind of, out of my head, program. I'm used to Intellisense. I'll get to Intellisense in a sec and how that can help us. Okay, so you would need a class, right? And then within there you would need a static void main method, right? So what is a method? A method is a functionality that gets called. So a method cannot exist on its own. It only can exist within a class. So it's a method you call to do things. It's like an executor kind of thing. So like do stuff or calculate this, sum up that, for instance. And then class is the actual container of all those things. So that are methods. Then you can also have something called properties, which is kind of, if you look at a dog, for instance, a dog has ears, a mouth, a nose, or snout rather, it has fur. All those things are properties of a dog. And you could say, okay, well, if we translate program into a dog, I'm just gonna maybe delete this. So if we have a dog, we could say, right, we have a method called, and methods are funny. I'm gonna get you that now in a sec. Bark. All right, so a dog can bark. So when he barks, you can do stuff, and also you can, for instance, say void. Wait, let's actually say I don't know. I'm flabbergasted. Dog. What can a dog do? What will make sense here? Let's just say dog sleep, huh? But we want the sleep to return a time. So a function can always either return nothing, which is void, but a function normally returns something. So it's a function you call and you get an answer back. In this case, we want to say we want to return a date time, which we specify as date time, and then we say sleep, and then it will do things and we expect here to return the daytime it will wake up, for instance. So this is the example between a function that does nothing and a function that actually does something and return, well, the function that returns nothing, that does something and returns nothing, and a function that does something and return something. Does that make sense? I hope. So that's that. And then a function can accept parameters. Now, the same way we specify the type of a function, it's type and name, you specify the arguments, which is the parameters in here. So we can go int. So let's say we have our class again that we have, and go back here to void main. Let's just call this calculator, for instance. And then we, for instance, say I want to return an int. Int is a number. Strings are strings. Doubles are sort of floating point numbers. And what else are there? There are bytes. There are booleans, also very important. Boolean is a true or false value. So in this case, if we have a sum, I want to return a sum of two numbers. So I would say int number 1, for instance, comma, int number 2. And then also note your variable names, just like your class names, is they are case sensitive, right? So you need to sort of make sure you specify the case sensitivity there. So casing matters. But when we get into Visual Studio, you will see it's actually easier. It helps you out. And also the names cannot contain spaces, because I cannot do that. I cannot say int number space 1, because it will think that this is the name of the integer and it will try to parse that, and it cannot. So there cannot be any spaces. If you want spaces, it's not really advised to do this, but you could do that, right? So underscore 1 to make it still one thing. Okay, now our int function, for instance, now we can say return number 1 plus number 2. Or in fact, we can say var, which is a variable declaration, answer is, my answer is number 1 or number 2. Also, if you want to be explicit, you can say int answer is number 1 and number 2. Given that number 1 and number 2 are both ints, you can do that as well. But I prefer using var. Var is like a mechanism to sort of say I infer the type from the return type kind of thing. Now I have a var answer that adds number 1 and number 2, and I always end my lines with a semicolon. Right, so that's how that works. And now to return it, because I need to return an int, I can go return answer, for instance. Right, so that's how that works. Okay, so now let's use that class, paste our program in there. Like I said, a function, any program, because this on its own won't do anything. It will just, when I compile this, it won't run. It will actually give me an exception. So to prove a point, let's actually save this. Let's actually save this somewhere. So we go to I'm going to say calculator, and I'm going to save this as this program. That's my program, right? So that's how that's going to work. And I wonder, I'm just thinking how I can compile this without a csproj, which is a project file. It's called what do you call it again? C#. CSC. No, it's not CSC, is it? I have no idea. There you go. Let's not waste time. So I have my calculator here. I'm just going to maybe steal this CS_proj file in a minute, just to show you what I mean. Alright, so we have got this calculator CS_proj. So CS_proj is your project file that .NET uses to run everything. It's like a container for your application. Alright, so now if I go cd back and I want to go cd calculator, I can go .NET run, and that will go and find my CS_proj file, and it will see, right, that's in there. I'm going to run my application. I'm going to look for the program CS class, or the program class rather, and it's going to look for this class. It's going to open it and it's going to say, well, I've got this, that's cool, compile it. It compiles, right? So if we look at the bin debug core 3, okay, it does not compile because CSC cannot compile. Program does not contain a static main method, so this is important. So it needs to have that static main method to compile, so which is what we've done. So that signature, it will look for class program, and it has static void main, right? So we can save that, and then when we hit .NET run again, it just does nothing. So it compiles, but it does nothing. So here you could see that it has spit out a bunch of stuff. This exe is the actual application that runs, and then that DLL is your application. It's this exe is the application, but the DLL is also the application, but we'll get to DLLs in a sec. It's kind of weird how it's here, but just bear with me. Just know that this exe is your application, right? Okay, so now how do we get the application to actually do things, right? So now let's say I want to use my calculator. Then I can go say, all right, var, yet again, I'm defining a variable. I'm going to go var calculator. All right, that's my variable name. Now I want to create a calculator. So I can go and create a calculator type. So I'm going to go say is new calculator. All right, so now I have a new instance of a calculator type that I've just created here. So now that's cool, right? So if I want to now say sum, now let's go var sum, and we say we want to calculate the sum of 1 plus 1, for instance. Then we can go and say calculator dot sum, right? And because our function has number 1 and number 2 that's required, right? We need to now specify 1, like the first parameter, which is 1. And if we want to add 1 to 1, we say 1, or 2 if we want to add 1 to 2, which is 3. So from this case, we'll just add, now let's make it 1 plus 2. All right, do that. Okay, and now we want to display the message on the screen. To do that, we use system.console.writeLine, which is a function which includes, this function exists within the console class within that namespace. We'll also get to namespaces in a sec, but this console class is exactly same as this class here, or a class, and it contains a writeLine, which is a built-in .NET function, and it allows you to write stuff to the console, which is the black screen, right? So we're going to be writing, for instance, the sum is, and then plus, which we're adding things, so we say sum, like that. I save that file, I go back here, I go .NET run, and then we'll see, well, something else is wrong. So it sort of complains about other issues that it has. And it says here, calculator sum is not accessible due to its protection level. Now, what does that mean, right? Now, yet again, it's to do with these modifiers. So for this one class to be able to call in a function in another class, that function needs to be exposed, right? So either private or protected or public. So in this case, I want to make it public, right? And then all of a sudden, some will be accessible from program. Okay, so I've just added public into some. And now if I hit save, let's .NET run this. And now it works, right? So now it says, hey, there's a bug. Let's quickly say this, the sum is space, and then the sum. So if we run it again, we say, well, the sum is 3, which is quite cool. So this is C# 101, I would say. Very, 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 very basic. All right. So this is the idea of program entry point and all that kind of things. I hope you guys can follow along. Yet again, if there are any questions, stop me and we'll reverse a bit and we'll maybe look into these kind of things. All right, so now let's go see what was the CSproj file that we have here. So the CSproj file, we can actually just open that with Notepad, I would say. So in here, a CSproj file, it's a project file that is actually a DLL, I would say. In .NET, it's a XML representation. So you say it's a project, and you point to the .NET, the Microsoft .NET SDK as the SDK, and it has a few properties, which are included in a property group kind of tag. If you are familiar with HTML, this might seem familiar to you because this is kind of like this is XML, right? And we say, well, our output of our application is the exe, right? And the target framework that we want to be running on is version 3 of .NET Core. So it's a .NET Core app 3.0. So basically, this is all you need to create a project. So minimally, to run a program, you would need, or to make a compiled program, you would need to have a project file, so a CSproj. So that's where that is. So all these things I've done now, you could do manually like a notepad that I've done, or you can go ahead and do like we did previously. We did .NET New Console, right? And we created a Hello World application. Let's skip the song. All right. Okay, so now this is the Hello World application that we have in here. So let's investigate how this works. So this is also, like I said previously, that's the exact same CSproj, right? And it knows all the files that's in the same directory to include automatically. If you want to exclude files in a CSproj, to be not considered to be for compilation, you need to explicitly define it in that CSproj file to exclude those files. But if you don't say anything, it will automatically include all the C# artifacts for compilation. So this program CS, it looks familiar, right? So it has a bunch of extra stuff, right? But the rest of the things, like this part at least, looks quite familiar to this part, right? So we have, let's maybe put this next to each other. Maybe zoom in a bit. So we have a class and we have a class in both, right? So both of them are the same. So the stock standard one, we have a static function which is required, and then the normal signature is to have a string arguments, which is a string, like an array of strings that needs to be passed in into the application if you're going to be using it. But in our case, we're not using that. Then it uses console.writeLine, which is the same as system console.writeLine. But why is this different? Now, this is all namespaces, right? So classes can exist within namespaces. So in this case, class program exists within a namespace hello world, which is typically your assembly root, and you can have multiple levels of namespaces. So for instance, you can have hello world.foo, which is the foo sub namespace of the hello world namespace. So you can author your namespaces as deep as you want, but also just a piece of advice, keep it simple, because you can run into dependency problems later on. But just keep it simple, keep it hierarchical, and just party from there. So our application typically is wrapped around a namespace, in this case hello world, which means if I go hello world dot, I will get program dot, I will get main, right? So that's how that hierarchy works. And doing the way we've done here is not wrong, but it's kind of tedious to all the time go system.console.writeline, system.console.writeline all the time. You know, it gets quite tedious. So we can, pardon the shortcut here, we can say using system. So we can tell the compiler, hey, within this file, I'm using the system namespace. So don't bother asking me the whole time for it. So in our case, we can just go here using system, and it will automatically import system for us. So we can take that out, right? So we can leave that out, and you can just work at it as expected. So that is namespaces. So what did we cover now? We've covered classes, we've covered functions, we touched a bit on properties, and we also touched on namespaces, which is also very important in the programming array. Okay, so now let's quickly see. Let's take the application that we have here. Now, to working in Notepad is kind of tedious the whole time. So what we'll do, we'll quickly jump into Visual Studio Code. We can go to code.visualstudio.com, and you can quickly download that for Windows. So that is a Electron-based app, which runs totally cross-platform, and it supports .NET Core or anything else like React and all that kind of things. But it's just a fancy text editor. It's not as full-featured or full-fledged. What? This user installer is not meant to be run as administrator. Okay. Where was I? Let's just maybe open with. So it's just a code editor, right? So you use that to edit advanced code editing stuff. There's a difference between VS Code, like we have here, and IDE, which is a full-blown development environment. We won't touch Visual Studio at this episode, but just to show you the basics of .NET to get started. That's the focus, right? Right, so it is installed. That's great. And how do you run it? Well, I normally just go from command line or from my search, I go code, and that just will just open up code, Visual Studio Code. You could even go from your terminal. Let's actually pin this up because we would need that again. Pin to taskbar. So we just open up your terminal, go code, and it will open up an instance of code, and you can go there. So let's actually do that. So if we go to our let's go to our calculator. You can either do this in two ways. You can go code in this space, or you can just right click and say open with code, which is quite cool. So this will actually open up a Visual Studio Code instance of your project, right? And get this now. When you open this up, the first thing it does, do you see, or you don't see, I actually need to hide myself, yeah? 1 second. Where are we here? Where? There we go. So I'm quickly hiding myself. So do you see here on the right hand corner, like over there, this is not a notification popping up. Maybe just move it up. Yeah, there we go. So this notification is quite cool. It sort of recognizes that you're trying to do C#, and it suggests to install a C# extension, which will help us to run .NET Core. So this is the OmniSharp for Windows extension, which we can use to run. Which is nice. So it comes with strongly typedness. So while that's installing, let's quickly talk about Intellisense. So when you are coding like in Notepad, we don't have the luxury of help. We could go to the docs all the time, and we could go back to the terminal and go .NET run, and we'll get the errors and we'll go back and fix them. But it would be great to work within an environment and without any distraction, give us some hints on what to do next or what is wrong. So Intellisense is a mechanism to highlight the code. Normally it's red to say this is wrong, or yellow, which means this is an error, or green, which is this can be better, for instance. And if you go dot, you have your Intellisense popping up saying what is possible from in this context. So you will see it pop up now. It will suggest stuff that we can just pick from a list instead of thinking of, oh, what was that command again, right? So that is how that works. So it's been installed. I think we need to restart VS Code for it actually to kick in. Right, so now we are here. So you can see how it kind of lights up. Oh, it needs to be... I need to put my references settings font. Let's just bump up the font again. Font. Text editor, yes, font. So let's maybe do that in 20. I think this looks much better. Right. So this is our application. So note that when I go dot, right, it pops up with all these goodness. So it will say it will fetch all the stuff that console class can do for me. So in this case, it's got a bunch of things like background color, beep, caps lock, clear. So the purple things that you would see here is are the methods, and the little icons with the wrench, that's the properties. So that what I was talking about properties earlier, and these lightning icons, that are events. So we'll also dive into events in a different episode, which is also quite cool. So the idea is, if we want to say something else like console, you see, as I type things, it kind of suggests to me what I can do in this context. And you see, if I just leave it like it is, it will actually give me an error, which is that little squiggly line. It will then show me, well, there is an error. So it says, well, it's either expecting a comma or a semicolon, and it's not a valid type. So I need to go dot, and I can go right line, for instance. And I open it up, and then it says, well, great, thank you. Or let's say, would you like another? Let's ask a question, right? Would you like another? So how do we get input from our application? Well, it turns out that console provides a mechanism to do that, right? So we can go within our application, we can say var, because we're going to get input, right? We say maybe let's start with var key. Now let's say input. Let's keep it simple. Our input is console.readline. All right. Actually need to move that up down a bit. So we have the sum is whatever. Then we ask, would you like another? And then we wait for input. Right. So I'm going to save that. Now, instead of going back to instead of going back to your terminal and type .NET run, you could do this in two ways. You can either open up the terminal within VS Code, right? Or you can just go click F5 or press F5 on your keyboard. That can also work. Or if you're a visual person, you could go on the left here, you can go to debug. And then you can just hit play. And then it will ask you, what environment are you running? So in this case, it's .NET Core. It's going to start up the configuration. So let's run this with .NET Core. It will run, and see here it runs. Maybe just zoom in a tad. In your debug console, the sum is 3. Would you like another? So that kind of pops up, so then I can give any feedback I want, and it will actually just work. Okay, so that's how that works. Oh, I need to, let's close that down. But I think for this purposes, let's maybe use a terminal to get a better view of how this works. Maybe I can still use the terminal, but can I zoom in here? I need to increase my terminal font size. Terminal. Let's see where we can include font. There we go, font. Let's make it terminal 20. Oh, that's much better. And in fact, I want to put my terminal. How can I put my terminal on the side? There must be a way of putting my terminal on the side. Oops. How would I do that? Terminal, come on. Can I go there? No, we can't. There we go. That's much better. That's what we want. Oh. Right, so we are now in the terminal, right? Let me see. All right, so now it would be nice. Let's say refactor application. So now it asks us calculate the sum. So let's see if we can, instead of passing this 1 and 2, make it dynamic so that we can ask it, please provide numbers. Now we can say, okay, great. Let's say console.writeLine, please provide number 1, for instance. Then we say, great, number 1, var number 1 is console.readline. I'm expecting input, and we're going to do the same with number 2. So we're going to say, please provide, let's say, please provide the first number, and please provide the second number. Right, that's much better. And then variable number 2. Then we have our instance of our calculator. And then instead of passing in 1 and 2, we can say pass in number 1 and number 2. We'll pass in there. But now there's a problem. It sort of warns us, even if we now going to run this .NET run, it will break because it cannot convert our input, which is normally string. So readline returns a string. So the way we know that, we can hover our hover, if you are American, we can hover our mouse over the readline, and it will pop up saying the readline. Do you see there? It returns a string value. So we need to now convert that into a proper int number. Even if I do that, it won't work. This whole thing is not an int. So I need to convert the whole thing to a int. And that's quite cool. You use casting for that. So casting means that you convert a type, something from one type to a different type. which may convert. So for instance, strings can always try to convert to ints, for instance. And to cast, you use the brackets. And within the bracket, you specify the type that you want to be casting to. But there's still a problem here because they say you cannot convert string to int as it is. So in this case, casting won't work. So it will try to cast whatever is next to this brackets. So the proper way of doing it is going int.parse. And you've guessed it, int is not just a type, but it's also a, give me a sec. Okay. So int is a function also, and it also contains a helper method called parse. In this case, it will accept a string, which is a read line, and we parse that out into a integer. So we'll just do the same for number 2. Great. So now if we compile that, there's no compilation errors. We can also see the compilation errors within the problems tab. Let's say, for instance, if we create a problem and we save, we will immediately see in the problems tab, we'll see that it is expected. So it will take us exactly to the point where it needs to be, where the problem is. Right, so we have our first input, we have our second input. Then we instantiate a class, our calculator, and we say calculate the sum of input 1 and 2. And we say on the screen, the sum is that. And then we ask, would you like another? And the idea is we want a loop the whole time. So the constructs of a loop in C#, you guessed it, it's you can either do a while, so you specify a while. So in this case, we'll say while, and you need to give it a condition. So in this case, I'm just going to say while true, and everything that needs to be looping. What's this? Why is the formatting not working here? Okay, good, like that. So anything within this while, so it will while true, while it's true, so it will always go in there. So it will do these kind of things. It will ask for a number, it will ask for a different number, it will calculate a sum, it will display it on the screen, and it will automatically loop up again. It will ask a number again, etc. So that is what we want here. So let's quickly uncomment this. So comments, very important, is when you go 2 forward slashes in C#, that means comments. So, and it also turns green. So comments are a way of putting notes. So I can, for instance, say this is a note. So you can put any text you want in there, as long as it is on one line. You can put it on any text you want. And the idea is that you can put any notes you want, and that will be ignored by the compiler. So this is for the programmers to understand a program maybe. Also note to self, if you want to do multi-lines like this, it won't work because it will see it as a statement. So in the case of multi-lines, you go /*, and if you want to end a line, you go */. So that's the way you can do multi-line comments in .NET. That's comments. So that's, you can also comment out code instead of deleting them. You can sort of see them as comments, and then it will compile, right? So that's a way around it. If you go .NET Run now, it asks us, okay, great. Please provide the first number. So in this case, let's say 10. Please provide the second number. Let's say 20. The sum is 30. Would you like another? And it asks, please provide a number. And then I can go ahead and I can do all sorts of things. It will continue, and it will loop and loop and loop, right? So we need a way to opt out of this loop. And this is where this will come in. Would you like another? Asks a question that will change the condition within our loop. So for instance, let's create a state machine. So now we have a var, let's call this exit. We call this false. And then we say var, if I don't want to exit, so if we go var exit is, if exit is false, right? So we say equals is 2 equal signs in C#. So if exit is false, which it is here, I assign it with 1 equal sign. It's quite tricky. So I assign a value with 1 equal sign and I check with 2. So I set it as false and I check it, is it false? So exit is false, that means it's true, and then it will loop. It will continue looping until exit is not false anymore, right? So now, would you like another? We would like to answer or get input to see if it's if it has been if you want to specify yes or no, for instance. So instead of now reading a line, you could go and grab the input from the screen and go, is this yes or no, for instance? Let's maybe do that to see. Then we can do decisions, right, in C#. Decisions are easy. Decisions, you can go either be true or false. You can go if, open up the brackets, if input, we check it with double quotes. If it is a Y for yes, then I open up my bracket. So if statement contains 2 parts: the true part, what to do when it's true, and the false part, what to do when it's false. If you don't specify the false part, it doesn't have a false part, so it's only evaluating. If input is Y in this case, if it's not Y, it will just continue the program as is, because there are no there is no else conditions. But if you want to put in else, you can go else and do other stuff here. If you want to maybe say if it is a capital, because capitals matter, you could go and say else if input is capital Y, and then also do the same thing. So in this case, it will say if it's small y, else if it's a big Y, else if it's anything else. You can put stuff in there, right? But we don't have an else, so which is fine. But we do have the scenario where the guy's caps lock can be on, so it can be either that or that. So the problem here is that we would have said initially, we would have said, well, in this case, when it's Y, I'm going to set exit as true, all right? And if it's a capital, I'm also setting my exit as true. You guessed it, this is kind of duplicate code, and it's not really advisable to do it this way. So this is where the operators can come in and help us, right? So instead of doing this, this will totally work. So if I hit save and just clear the screen, .NET run, the first number, well, let's say 11, second number is 22, and the sum is 33. Would you like another? Let's say A, that will loop again. So let's say 1 and 1, that is 2. Would you like another? Yes. Well, in this case, it should actually be no, but you get my point. It should be N. Would you like another? It's not. Or we could have said Y, and we could have said not. So that's the negative of equals equals. So if it's not Y, or it's not capital Y, then I exit. I set my exit as true. It will come up again and check. While exit is false, okay, it's not false. In this case, I will exit. I will exit this whole thing. So we could refactor this as it's not true. That's the same as not as false. Or we can say exclamation exit. So that's how we can negate something while something is, so an exclamation in C# means not. So it's a negative of whatever it is. So while, and this reads like this, while not exit. So while exit is while exit is false, so while not exit, it will do things. All right. So in this case, if input that we give is not y, so you set exit is true, and in here it can be other things as well, right? Else, if the input is y, set exit as true again, which means it will fail. This is a bit redundant. So what we want is specifying an operator. So you can have different types of operators. You can have and or operators. Now the difference between and or, this is where it becomes complicated, but not really, is that you can test certain conditions. You can say, in this case, we want to test for both the lowercase and uppercase y's. So we would say if input is not y, or in this case it's a pipe, two pipes, so stripe, which is or, it means or. We can say that one. So this reads as follows. If input is not y, or input is not capital Y, then exit true. So then we can get rid of that redundant code that we have there, right? So that's how easy it can get. But also, if you, for instance, want to test if something is these two conditions and something else, right? You can add more ors here if you want to, but let's say you want to test for y, but you also want to test for the amount of times this thing looped, right? You eventually want to exit on, let's say, 5 times, for instance. You could also do that. So let's quickly just test to see if this works. So now, for all the guys that just joined us, hello, welcome. I'm doing a quick .NET workshop on C# and .NET for the beginners out there. They want to start up with .NET and .NET Core and C# and to get started in programming. So welcome. If you have any questions, pop me a question on this chat here. Oh, this way, chat way there, and then I will do my best to answer it. So .NET Run. The first number is 1, second number is 1, which is 2, which is like another, let's say no, or anything, because it tests for anything else, and then it will stop. All right? Great, so that's how that works. Or even if you go .NET Run, the first number is 1, second number is 1, which is 2, which is like another, yes, and it will, that doesn't work. Why does this not work? Set. You see, there's a bug in my code. So would you like another? It sets exit as true. So we would have said if it's not, right? We want to exit. Otherwise, we want to continue. So anything else that's not, that's n, we want to exit. So it's not y, it's n. Where was I? I was talking about more conditions within an if. So let's see, we want to loop our things, let's say max 3 times, and then it must just stop inevitably. We can introduce another variable on top here. Let's call it var times. And we say the times is start with 0. So now it's 0 times this thing has run. And then when a loop goes for the first time, at the end, we want to say times is times plus 1. We can do that. So that will increment the times to 2 and to 3 and to 4 and to 5, etc. All right. So now we can actually use this to exit, right? So we can say if input is, if it asks, would you like another? If it's not, if it's no, then it will exit. Or you can say, you can put this in brackets. But I always want to exit if times is 3 or more, for instance. Then I use and. So it's 2 parentheses. So and. So I want to test, is it no? And is my times smaller than 3? So in this case, I'm going to say times, is it smaller than 3? But remember, these numbers are 0 based, so it starts at 0. So you have 0, and it increased to 1, then it increased to 2, and then it increased to 3 only when it sort of hits there. So if it's smaller than 3, which means it ran 3 times, because it's 0 based, it will exit immediately. So let's see if this works. Just hit run. Go .NET run on the side. First number, let's say 1. This is the first time I'm running this, right? So this is run. The second number is 1, which is 2. Would you like another? Yes. The first number, okay, let's make it 2 and 2, which is 4. Would you like another? Yes. First number, let's say 5 plus 5 is 10. Would you like a number? Yes. So it just loops all the time. I wonder why. So times is smaller than 3. Does times even get increased here? 1, 1. Yes. See what happens here. So if that evaluates and times is smaller than 3, it does not exit. So then it says times is times plus 1. Why does that happen now? It's supposed to update times. That's interesting. Let's say if I go plus plus. Oh. So I'm going to clear the screen here. Just go .NET run. Or maybe let's just write out the times to see how many times this thing has run. So let's say console.writeLine. Let's say ran times ran so many times. Or let's say attempt times. Okay, cancel that. Let's run that again. Number first one is 1. The sum is 2. Would you like another? That doesn't run. Doesn't even get there. Oh, okay. So if I say yes, attempts is 0. Okay, which is fine. We say number one. Yes, attempt is 1. Then I go and say, okay, number is 1 and 1. Attempt is 2. Would you like another? Yes. Attempt is 1 and 1. Attempt is. Would you like another? Yes. Attempt is now 3, so maybe the last one it will work. So would you like another? Yes. Attempt is 4. So in this case, times does not evaluate here. So let's see why. Because if my input is no and my times is smaller than 3, I want to exit. So that's a bit concerning because this needs to be an OR. So if that happens, or my times, so or change this to OR, and that will work then. That will work then. So let's see. And because it's 0 based, let's maybe move up this to the first one. And because it's a 0 based, we can say it is times plus 1, just to sort of make it user friendly. So instead of saying times 0, we say time 1, and then we test like this. This notation that I've done here in the bottom, times plus plus, this is shorthand for times equals times plus 1. So you say set time as itself, but increase it with 1. And I prefer it to use this way because they say times plus plus. It is a shorthand version to increase the times, for instance. So now it should work. So now let's quickly exit our application and run it again. Please provide the first number. So let's say 10, and we say 10, which is 20. Would you like another? Also note there's attempt. Ooh, okay, that's a problem. Let's quickly fix that. So it's just appending one to this here. So if we say that should calculate times and put it in. Let's just say if this works. Yeah, attempt 1. Okay. Provide the first number is 10. Second number is 10, which is 20. Would you like another? Yes. Okay. Now it breaks. Because, obviously my times are smaller than 3. That's why it exits. So if our times is bigger than 2, with other words 3, other way around, it needs to sort of exit. So if my input that I want another one is no, or capital no, or is my times that I've done this whole thing bigger than 2, then I need to sort of exit. Otherwise I just increase the times and go on. It's kind of a evaluation software that we're writing here, So let's go .NET run. Number is 10, which is 20. Would you like another? Yes. Let's say 10 and 20, which is 30. Would you like another? Yes. And now I after this third attempt, I expect it to exit. So we can go, well, let's say hundreds and hundreds. Would you like another? Yes. And it's supposed to exit. It does not exit. One. Oh, you see, it exits on the fourth attempt, which is very... So it exits on the fourth attempt because it does that first. It does the code first, and then it realizes, okay, well, while do it and then loop again. And if the times are bigger than 2, exit. And it will increase times. It will go back into this loop. If we say times is 1, take this 1 out of here. Let's see if this works. 1 and 1 is 2. 2 and 2 is 4. It's 4. And then we have, yes, then 3. 5 and 5 is 10. Yes. And it just stops. Alright, so the times, it starts with 1. And I have my while loop. And it writes out the times. I can just actually get rid of the brackets now. That wasn't needed. I was confused about the zeros, about the nulls. And then at the end, if it's not, or I exceeded my times that I'm allowed to, then I can do things, right? All right, so on that point, so let's make our application a bit more flexible, or a bit more customizable. I would like, when I run my application, when I say .NET run, I want to be able to pass in the number of times my application needs to run. So instead of having a fixed amount of times, like 2 in this case, I want to be able to say .NET run 5 or .NET run 2 or 3, right? To make my application run so many times. So to do that, we have this string arguments that's part of the signature, so it's args. And that will catch all the parameters. So if you, for instance, go .NET run, and if you say foo, it will put in foo in an array. An array is a list of things. If you say space bar, it will put an array of foo and bar in a list. And baz, it will put an array of 3 items, foo, bar, baz. So you can pass in as many parameters as you want. So for this case, we just like want to pass in like a number, huh? And we're going to be assuming that's the first argument. The show is not about, or this episode is not about passing arguments. is about to understand the way forward. So let's see. Times, I want to now, instead of setting it as, actually make a new variable, max times. If I say max times is 2, and if I say, let's just say, yeah. So let's say my max times is 3. So if my times is bigger than my max times minus 1, then, or actually equals, or bigger or equals than my max times, then I want to exit. So if my times is bigger or equals than my max times, which is 3, it needs to stop. So that's the exact same code I've just written now. But I want to be able to make this 3 customizable. And to do this, I can use this args variable to basically give me a variable number. So we could say, well, if right, args, well, let's actually start here. Let's say args, or actually let's say args dot, and because this is an array, it pops up with a bunch of things, right? I can say first, like that. I know that's like a function it has, but if it doesn't have the function imported like here, like using, it needs a different library called link here. So it says it cannot find first. So the cool thing is, do you see that little light bulb? There. This little light bulb here, when I click on it, it suggests to me, would you like to import system.link, which is a different library? Then if you click yes, it will add the using system.link on top. And then that squiggly will go away. So now this will take the first item in the array and assign it to max times. All right. So just bear in mind, because this is an array that's defined by the block brackets, the string of the arguments, which is a string array, max times the first will be a string as well. This will then break my condition here because it's trying to compare apples and pears. It's trying to compare a times, which is an int, to a string, which is not possible. It even tells you when you hover, operator bigger or greater than, or greater or equal than, cannot be applied to int and strings. So it kind of guides you there, yeah, in a sense. So to do that, we just need to sort of parse this. You go int.parse, and you do that, and that's fine. And then it just works. So it converts whatever you have to a int. And let's see if that works. So now if I have .NET run, so let's run it once. So attempt 1, first number is 1 and 1. Sum is 2. Would you like another? Yes. And it will just break because I only wanted to run it once. So if I say run it 3 times, like we had before, attempt 1, 1 and 1, that's 2. 2 and 2 is 4. 4 and 4. Oh, would you like another? Yes. Okay. 4 and 4 is 8. Would you like another? Yes. And then it just breaks. So that's how you can pass in arguments. So one would say, well, okay, that's cool, finally, but what about if I pass in foo, right? It will then blow up in your face because it cannot convert input string. Is not in the correct format. So it will try to convert string, because it's string, remember, it tries to parse that into a int, which is a foo is no int, right? So to do that, we just have to modify our code a bit. We can go try parse. All right, in try parse, it's a boolean, right? So we can say it returns true whether it has succeeded, and it returns false if it does not have been succeeded. So we can go here and we say, we can take out max times. We can go say var parsed. We can actually take that out completely and say if int.try parse whatever If that worked, I want to run my program. Else, I just want to ignore it. But this accepts a different, if I'm not mistaken, this accepts a different variable, an out parameter. Now, out parameters are interesting because out parameters is things you can only assign to. It's not input parameters like a function. You give something that's input, it goes into the function. Output parameters goes out of the function. So in this way, we can now define our max times. But in C# 8, you can, I believe it's from 8 or 7 point something, you can define it as var. Out var max times. Okay, then you can say, is that true now? Is that working? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we have that. So this thing, what will this do? It will say, if I try parse my whole program and it worked, it will execute whatever is in this brackets, right? This answer that it tries to parse, it will put it automatically into this max times output variable. You also note that max times is defined here, so it's accessible. So we could say, you know, we could move this whole thing in here. I think Control Shift F or something. What is the format? How do you format in format code VS Code? How do you do that again? Let's just see. Control K, Control D, and that's not that. Shift Alt and F. Shift Alt F. No, that's not it. In any case. Must be a reason. How do I do that? Code formatter. What is this? Shift Alt F. That's what I've done. Shift Alt F. Oh, there we go. Shift Alt F. Okay, great. So that's a pro tip. Shift Alt F will format your code for you, indent it properly and stuff like that. Make it a tad more readable, I would say. Okay, for the guys that's joining me now, welcome into the show. You are just sort of an hour and a half into our little workshop. We're almost done. Almost need to run, really. But welcome. We have started doing a basics of C# programming or .NET, I would say. If you have questions, do feel free to ask me into this chat here, and then I'll do my best to sort of answer them. Oh, there we go. I've actually got a in between these chat. Let's quickly see. We have here. Kukan, is that true? Hi Kukan, thank you very much for saying hello in the chat. Nice to see you. Who else did I miss? I have this Pretzel Rocks chat lines going in there because it's attributions to the songs I listen to, which makes it a bit difficult to read the chat sometimes. But hey, it gets better. All right, so we've got a couple of guys watching, which is quite cool. So we are building a program in C# that's very basic to teach .NET and C# from the ground up. So the folks that's just joined us, welcome. If you want to skip back, by all means, after the show, you can totally skip back to my video. All these videos will be archived to YouTube as well. But that's cool. So what do we have here? Now we have... I'm gonna try parse. So if my first argument is parsed, I will assign it into the max times argument, and then my program will just run, right? And remember, if can have two segments. So in this case, my else segment, I want to say, you know, console dot write line, there's a problem. We can say, great, well, hey, whatever you passed in, args dot first is, oh, I have to concatenate strings, so I go strings is not valid, yo. Let's do that. So I concatenate words here. So hey, whatever the first argument was is not valid, yo. That's what I'm going to say. So let's now run this again. Oops, not there. Dotnet run foo. Hey, foo is not valid, yo. So that's pretty cool. You know, this makes it a tad less readable at sometimes, having console.write line times and stuff like that. So a way around it is you could use the $sign in C# to sort of make inline variables. Now do that, you prefix your string with a $, and then you can go open brackets and you can put times in there, and you can remove this. So it will say attempt times. That is also fine. So anything outside the brackets is strings, and anything inside the brackets is C#. So it's compiled thing. So you can literally put anything that can be compiled into that brackets. And we do the same with this one. Let's go $, and we say sum. We can take the plus out because it's less readable, and especially for this, you know, this is so annoying. So maybe we can move that one. Will this work? Control. Oh, that won't work. Shift Alt. That doesn't work. So let's move that into the brackets. I see I need my $sign there in front. And then I can go, that is not valid, yo. So that reads a bit better. So hey, the first argument is not valid, which is pretty slick, I would say. Right. What do we have? Let me see. Great. So good. Okay. What do I have now? What do I need to do still here? That's pretty much it, I would say, for this application. Now, the cool thing is, because we have a program and we have a calculator that does stuff, we can ship this as a separate thing and reference it. So we'll look into references later on into the series. But yeah, I think to maybe take a step back into C# and the .NET, this application that we've run now, we can actually go back to our bin directory, debug and .NET Core app. This exe, we can just double click it. Well, it fails, right? So if we, and this is the case we've not catered for. So if we say .NET run without arguments, it will break because it tries to parse an empty string or empty array to integer. So the way around this that we can do is we can assume that if the arguments are nothing, we can give it something. So let's say, let's call it var given max times is let me just see, is first. So given max times is args.first. So if you say .first, it will require the array to have at least one item. And if you say first or default, max, that variable will default to null if it does not contain anything. So if args does not have anything, it will take the first one, or it will default to the default value of the string, which is null, for given max times. Right? So we can say here if then we can go if given max times is null, then we can go and say let me just see if max times. Yeah, so if given max times is null, I'm going to set given max times as a default to 3, for instance. I need to put a string there, right? So now instead of try parsing the arguments, I go parse the given max times, and I parse it out into max times there. So now if I save it and I run it again, .NET run, it will assume 3. So 1 is 1, it's 2, 2 is 2. Oh, let's just exit this again because it's a bit annoying. 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4. Well, 2 is 4. 3 and 3 is 6. Would you like another? Yes, and then it will break on that. And also to test out the other one is the first attempt. 1 and 1 is 2. Would you like another? Yes, and it will exit from there. Right, I think this is it for this episode. I think we're going to take it slowly. But one last thing, maybe a little teaser, and I'm actually very interested to see how this will work. So if we go to the command line, and if we say, for instance, let's maybe exit code. Let's say .NET new. Let's go and create a WinForms application. Now that's a Windows Forms application. So if you do not want to create these kind of console applications, you can totally do with WinForms applications. To do that, we do this. We say, where's my screen? There we go. .NET new WinForms. And because we are on kind of the dev directory, we can name it something. We can say my WinForms app. And that has been created in my WinForms app folder. If we go to here, and it has a bunch of other files that we'll get to in another episode. But now let's open that with a VS Code to see what is happening there. So we've got our form, we are familiar with the classes, we've got some extra stuff, and this is maybe for the next episode that we'll dive in. We've got a designer and we've got all sorts of other things, but also we still have a class program with a static void main, and that bootstraps our application. So it will start up the application and will create a form. So I'm not going to go into the details of this. So now let's go and say cd my WinForms app and go .NET run. And this actually opens up a GUI, like a command or like a proper WinForms application, which you can look and touch and you can put buttons on. So we can continue our journey to learn .NET and apply our C# knowledge to this. So this has been great. So let's quickly see if there's any questions in the chat room. I don't think there are. I actually need to run. Thank you ever so much, guys, for tuning in. If you like these kind of rough episodes on how to get started on kind of things, do let me know on Twitter. It's at FardyRenders on Twitter, or just send me an email or go to my website renders.co. Do reach out. I know I'm quite open in answering any questions you might have. Give me some feedback. Would you like more of these kind of sessions, or would you like to have more kind of advanced type of things? Let me know, and then we can plan ahead and plan accordingly. I would like to sort of share the knowledge and how to get started. So this was basically C# and .NET in about an hour and a half, I would say, to get cracking. Homework for you guys out there that do not know how that works as beginners. I challenge you to go out there and do what I've done now yourself, and go to the docs.net or the dot.net website. You can learn a bunch of stuff there, It's you go over to learn. Learn. There's a bunch of material here that you can, how to download, install it, creating your first app, all the stuff that I've basically done today. You can do, and it's also quite cool. It has this interactive player that you can do things, and step by step taking you through .NET. If you don't want to install .NET or is unable to install .NET on your machine, you can go to this try .NET in your browser button, or even you can go to is it try dot, you can go to try.dot.net, and that will in essence open up a, well, that should open up. That doesn't work now. Why not? This used to work. Any case, so this used to work, and how this works is if you go, for some reason this code editor is not loading up properly. It might, oh, there we go. There it lights up. There we go. So try.dot.net. This will open up a console application, and in essence, if we go back to our little project that we've made, which is in dev calculator. If we take our calculator class, open with code, let's just say we've run all these code in line here, so we can paste everything in there. Clownfish see guk, can't see. Oh, sorry. Yeah, true. Yes, sorry about that, clownfish. So if you guys can go and read and learn more about .NET, going to .net.microsoft.com/learn. There's a bunch of stuff here. Let me just repeat that. For instance, the console application, the console parts, download and install. You can follow the steps like I've done here to get to what I've done in this hour and a half. Or you can try .NET in your browser. All right, so it's an interactive way of trying .NET if you are unable to do .NET yourself, or download the SDK or something. So what you can do, go to try.dot.net, try.net, and I've physically pasted my source code here that I've now just written with you guys. And if I run this, okay, it probably needs something. Argument null exception, value cannot be null. Why is that so? Maybe we do that. Hey, cool is that. Okay, so what I've done here is one thing I've missed is this little because args itself is null, so it doesn't contain anything that's null. So args itself is null. So what we do is ternary. Hi, clownfish ternary. I have no idea what you mean there. Maybe just elaborate, and I can answer. So if this is null, what you do with the question mark is it voids. If it's null, it just cancels the whole thing. So it will make this null as well. Ternary, yes, true. Clownfish, ternary. I'm not sure. I normally use that Elvis operator because it looks like Elvis's side profile. That's the Elvis operator, right? So it voids if this is null and you have that. Oops. So if you have that, let me just zoom in a bit. If you have that and you have the Elvis operator, and it's null, it will void everything else and make this null itself. So now if I save this and I run this, because we need input, I can go, well, 3. And it asks here on the bottom, do you see? Please provide the first number. So let's say 1. And then it says here 2. Why is this not working? Oh, it kind of runs, but its input is a bit, I think input is a bit iffy. But it kind of works, you get my drift. I do not have time to go further, unfortunately, but do stay tuned. Let me just switch over to here. Do stay tuned. Next time we'll definitely make more time to dive into things. So let me know either on Twitter or just reach out. Let me know what you guys think of this kind of show, and then we'll plan ahead and we'll make more of these content happening. So thank you ever so much for joining. I'm out, and I will see you guys again when live coding hits up. Cheers.